Hey guys, I'm Chris Bach and a very warm welcome to Friday Fretworks. And this week, in the absence of John Bollinger, Jason Shadrick or even Rebecca Dirks, I'm going to be running you down through my rig to perilously avoid what is undoubtedly a copyrighted term that I'm not allowed to use, I would imagine. Pretty self-explanatory. I'm going to take you through my rig from top to bottom, from the more obvious elements down to the minutiae and the stuff which I guess I get a lot of questions about on a very regular basis. So as ever, it probably makes sense to start at the start, in which case this is going to be the guitars. Now, I'm going to be taking 4 guitars out on the road with me, namely this. Be no surprise to see this. This is my Highway 1 Stratocaster. It's 2004. In Sunburst, and was bought primarily to be a donor guitar, to be honest, for my signature Radio Shop pickups, which I was developing at the time. These are the final prototypes in there, and I guess I'm slightly biased in regard to the pickups, but I've always thought it's a particularly nice sounding guitar. Plays beautifully, handles the kind of rigors of touring very well, very consistent, very stable. And always sounds good night after night. I would argue that is probably my main guitar, to be honest. Again, I've done kind of videos about the specifics of this guitar, which I shall link above and below. So do check that out if you want to hear more about it. But let's move on to the next one. So that's the first one. Next up, we have a relatively new addition to the stables, and that is, without dragging everything else out, including this Yamaha, we have the new Fender Ultra, American Ultra Series in Texas T. Again, last week's Friday Fretworks was about this specific guitar, so if you want to know any kind of further details, please check that out. I was a little bit kind of reticent, or not reticent so much, just kind of nervous, I guess, to start off with in regard to how I was going to find this guitar, obviously with a modern D-profile neck and noiseless pickups being a big one. I've never really found a set of noiseless pickups that I've particularly gotten on with, but they sound great and are particularly useful for the parts of the set where this guitar will actually be used, because it's a couple of tracks using heavier gains, so, you know, doing away with that 60-cycle hum is very helpful. Obviously, you've got the S1 switching system and maple neck, yada, yada, yada. Watch the video if you want to know more about that one. It's a great sounding guitar. Moving on to the Yamaha side of things. Again, a guitar you'll be familiar with if you watch Friday Fretworks semi-frequently. This is a Yamaha Revstar 502 in shot black. It's one of 2 502s that I own, the other one being in British Racing Green. That would argue probably sounds a little bit better than this one, to be honest, but this one just looks amazing and plays really nicely, marginally nicer than the other one. So if I can find a way of combining the two, that would be very cool. That's that. Again, I've done videos about that specific guitar, which I shall link. And lastly, and arguably the most expensive guitar in the rack, is this, which is a Patrick James Eggle Macon. Once again, I shall link to the relevant videos. Absolutely beautiful sounding Les Paul type guitar, I should say. Slightly aged finish with an aged nitro. Fairly flamey top, despite actually, when I chose this, I chose the least flame bit of wood that he had knocking around the workshop, much to his amazement. Plays and sounds absolutely stunning. Before we leave the guitars, definitely worth saying, across the board, pretty much without exception, Yamaha Ernie Ball Mega Slinkies, with the exception of the Paradigm 11s, which I'm using on the Patrick James Eggle, and sometimes the Yamaha. Probably give it a couple of shows into this tour, which we're rehearsing for at the moment, and I may even be over to that on the Yamaha. Moving into amp world. Now, as you can see, there's two amps running continuously here. The left being a Fuchs Clean machine that I've had a few years. Again, I shall link to the relevant videos, with a Zilla 1x12 cab. And on the right hand side, we have the Super Duchess V140 from Victory. Both running incredibly clean as possible, to be honest. The reason I love these particular amps is they have an immense amount of headroom. And both just fantastic sounding amps. The way I'm currently running them is actually as a wet-dry setup, which I shall get into when we get to the board in a minute. Basically what's happening is the Fuchs is handling the dry capabilities, or the dry side of things, while the Super Duchess is handling the wet side. No real reason for that, to be honest, apart from that's the way I kind of first plugged it in. As I said, they're both incredibly high headroom, so both can handle that with ease. Tonally are very slightly different sounding. I would say the Fuchs, I do remember reading that the topology of that amp is actually based on a bass amp, I think, and you can kind of hear that characteristic in its kind of tone every now and then. Very punchy, just a very solid sounding amp. The Victory, conversely, a little bit more sparkly, a little bit more shimmery, does that Fendery clean stuff incredibly nicely, and then the combination of the two just sort of, each fill in each kind of part of the EQ curve very nicely. Very complementary to fantastic sounding amps. Cables, all Ernie Ball, pretty much without exception. And then moving down to the last link in the chain. Again, I've done videos on this in the past. Not much has changed, to be honest, since last time, save for a couple of different pedals here and there for stuff that is very specific to the Bach & Evans set. Obviously, we've got the G2 from Gig Rig, controlling everything. And then on the underneath as well, if we lift this up, we have Klon KTR in the corner next to the Cherry Tone Centura, Origin Effects, Kali 76, King of Tone, Snout's Black Box, this tremendous sounding pedal. And then the wet-dry split is actually happening at the Gig Rig Humdinger. Obviously, the Gig Rig power and everything else. Fairly neat and tidy considering the sheer amount of stuff which is actually happening in there. And as I said, there's a couple of little changes on top. We've got the Greystone Fuzz still there. The Micropog from EHX has jumped in for a couple of Bach & Evans tracks where that comes in handy. We've got the EP Booster on the top as the last link in the chain for the solo boost. Super Trem, Super Delay. Got the Booner from Dawn of Prince, and obviously kind of doubling up on the Echo Rex side of things with the Catlin Bread. Tuner, yada, yada, yada. And obviously the Thorpe Gunshot, kind of handling the rockier side of things. So in regard to gear, to be honest, that's pretty much all that's happening. I say all, it's a fairly kind of condensed rig, I guess. Obviously, last time we went out on tour, I actually took the two Victory amps, so I took the V40 and the V140. This time, we're playing slightly larger venues with hopefully the capacity to turn up a little bit louder. We shall see whether that comes to fruition. But as I said, we are on tour. Bach & Evans touring now from November, pretty much through to March, on and off, with a couple of dates spread around here and there. Had a fantastic response to the day so far. The Cardiff one sold out within a week or so, and I've just learned this afternoon, funnily enough, that the 100 Club show in London, obviously an incredibly prestigious venue, has actually sold out as well. So if you fancy coming to see us, please do check out all the tour dates and links below. But as ever, I've been Chris Buck. This is Friday Fretworks. A massive thank you for watching. I shall see you next week for another episode. Cheers, guys. Take care, and I shall see you soon.